Decades after publishing On the Origin of Species, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution was actually losing ground among scientists. The biological community had split into two warring academic camps. On one side were the biometricians. They believed evolution was a continuous, gradual process of tiny improvements over immense periods of time. On the other side were the Mendelians. Taking their cues from Gregor Mendel's pea plant experiments, they argued that evolution happened in sudden, discrete jumps through hard particulate mutations. The two groups despised each other. They launched vicious personal attacks at academic conferences, absolutely convinced that their respective theories were mutually exclusive. This deadlock persisted because late 19th century biologists had almost zero mathematical training. They were trying to solve a structurally complex problem using only qualitative observations and verbal arguments. To unlock the unseeable machinery of life, biologists turned away from the microscope and toward the equation, translating nature into rigorous numbers. The men who stepped into that vacuum were Ronald Aylmer Fisher and J.B.S. Haldane. Both men were unsuited for normal society. They embraced extreme political ideologies, waged bitter public feuds, and navigated highly scrutinized personal lives. Yet despite their severe eccentricities, they shared a single, highly specific superpower, an uncompromising capacity for brilliant, cold, quantitative reasoning. Working completely independently of one another, these two maladjusted outcasts built the exact mathematical weapons required to end the biological civil war. R.A. Fisher was a Cambridge math prodigy with exceptionally poor eyesight and a terrifying temper. He was known to throw glass bottles at lab technicians, and in one fit of rage, he crushed a living mouse with his bare hand. He was also a deeply conservative, passionate eugenicist. He openly loathed the fertility rates of the working classes, a prejudice that fueled his obsessive drive to mathematically map how specific traits filter through human populations. But when Fisher applied his rigorous math to the raw biological data, he realized the academic war was entirely pointless. The numbers showed that Darwin and Mendel were completely compatible. This diagram illustrates Fisher's mathematical curve, quantitative genetics. It shows how multiple separate Mendelian genes, represented by these individual blocks, interact. When enough of these discrete factors act together, they form a bell curve. As the population scales up, those rigid little chunks smooth out into a single continuous gradient. Fisher's mechanism proved that Mendel's jumping mutations are exactly what builds Darwin's smooth evolutionary curves. Fisher's explosive temper alienated his peers, but his cold math successfully merged genetics and evolution. J.B.S. Haldane was Fisher's polar opposite. He was a massive, outspoken communist provocateur who loved to defy authority and actively flaunted his scandalous lifestyle to the British public. He was also violently brave. As a child, he happily allowed his scientist father to repeatedly poison him with toxic mine gases. Later, as a bombing officer in the World War I trenches, he treated combat like an enjoyable game, deliberately holding live grenades for as long as possible to maximize the resulting mayhem. Taking Fisher's foundation, Haldane wrote the dynamic equations required to predict exactly how natural selection changes gene frequencies over time. We can see Haldane's critical discovery in this dynamic population model. Mendelian inheritance actively maintains genetic variability by shuffling recessive traits into the margins without ever fully eliminating them. That protected variability is the crucial raw material populations rely on. When a sudden environmental threat applies pressure, those hidden recessive traits can rapidly multiply, saving the entire group. A man who spent his entire life actively seeking chaos and conflict was the one to calculate the hidden, predictable order of natural selection. Fisher and Haldane despised each other's politics, sitting on the absolute extreme opposite ends of the spectrum. Yet their separate mathematical equations locked together flawlessly. Their combined work established the modern synthesis. It officially ended the academic war by proving that Mendelian genetics acts as the actual engine driving Darwinian evolution. This synthesis transformed biology from a descriptive philosophy into a rigorous, predictive mathematical science. Because of that mathematical foundation, today's scientists don't have to wait thousands of years to guess how species adapt. They can track and predict evolution as it happens in real time, watching bacterial colonies mutate and reorganize in laboratory settings. These two abrasive mathematical eccentrics ultimately decoded the deepest secrets of life by forcing biology to calculate its own existence.